Welcome back to Morning Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Matt Witt, and here we are coming at you with our 53-man roster prediction. One of my favorite annual traditions we do on the show is making our predictions for the 53-man roster. And this is our final prediction, and I have to get this out quick because the Vikings are already making moves. They just released T.Y. McGill, defensive tackle, standout defensive tackle this preseason. One of the best players on the Vikings entire defense this preseason was already released from the team, and by the end of tomorrow we will have our 53-man roster and our 16-man practice squad. Yes, that's 16 players in the practice squad now. Just a few years ago it was only 10, so I like it. Okay, let's get started with this. We have to get this episode out as quickly as we can. Quarterbacks, I have two quarterbacks making the roster, obviously, with Nick Mullins backing up Kirk Cousins, not Kellen Mond. With Nick Mullins backing up Kirk Cousins, this means that the Vikings will release both Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion. I am still a big Mond fan, and I think he should be on the practice squad for the Vikings. If not, Sean Mannion will be on the practice squad. Both is you're kind of in a lose-lose situation right there. Still, huge fan of Kellen Mond. Has a long way to go, needs to develop. Okay, quarterbacks, I think we all can agree that this is the right list right here. Running backs, I have every single running back making the roster for the Minnesota Vikings. We are blessed. We might be a cursed franchise. We might be one of the most cursed franchises in the entire league, especially when it comes to kickers and quarterbacks. But God blesses us with some of the most talented running backs in the entire league. Not only running backs, but one of the most talented backfields in the entire league. With C.J. Ham and Dalvin Cook making one of the best running back starters in the league. Alexander Mattison adding to that, making a 1-2 punch in the backfield. Kane and Wangu, Ty Chandler both lighting up every defense in the preseason. I mean, come on, guys. 5 running backs on the roster in a Kevin O'Connell-led defense or offense. That's not seen very often. I don't remember him using running backs or tight ends much of at all when he was with the Rams. It was mostly wide receivers. But I do have the Vikings having 5 players in the backfield making the roster. I just think it's worth it. We cannot have Ty Chandler start his career on the practice squad because he will get swooped up. And I have Bryant Kobach being on the practice squad and released from the team. Wide receivers, also, we are blessed. I mean, is this not the best skilled position group in the entire league looking at running backs and wide receivers? Is it not? I mean, these wide receivers, and you saw in the preseason, it's going to be hard. We're going to have to cut some players who should be on the roster, who are deserving of the roster spot. I have the Vikings having 6 wide receivers make the roster, with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and KJ Osborne being our starters, Amir Smith-Marset in the rotation as well. Outside of that, I have Jalen Nailor and Dan Chisena being the wide receiver 5 and 6 for the team. Both will likely not get any reps on offense. I only have Jalen Nailor and Dan Chisena making the roster as special teams guys, because realistically, there's a big gap between our top 4 guys and the next. So those top 4 guys will be in rotation. Jalen Nailor and Dan Chisena will make the roster as special teamers. When it comes to players that will be released, wide receivers that will be released from the Minnesota Vikings, Olabisi Johnson, Blake Proehl, and Thomas Hennigan, unfortunately, all have potential season-ending injuries. It hasn't been released quite yet, but will be starting this upcoming season on the IR or PUP list for the team. Sucks to see what happened with BC. BC, it was a great run, but I think we've seen the end of BC in purple and gold, unfortunately. Wish him the best of luck wherever he goes next. Blake Proehl, sucks to see him on the list as well. As for the practice squad guys, Tristan Jackson and Myron Mitchell, I have both of those players making the practice squad. Again, they were on the practice squad last year, so they're making the practice squad back-to-back seasons. One of those players might get swooped up, especially Myron Mitchell. That man had a great preseason. On to tight ends for the team. Yeah, I have 3 tight ends making the roster. I know going into this offseason, I mentioned many times that the Vikings should only go with 2 tight ends. I love Zach Davidson. I could not put Zach Davidson on the practice squad for the Vikings. Irv Smith Jr., monster, absolute beast, going into contract year. Maybe one of the only good draft picks from 2019, him and Armon Watts. Great to see him coming with the team. Johnny Munt, amazing addition. You have one of the best blocking tight ends. Quietly one of the best blocking tight ends, which is exactly what we need. We need more blockers on offense because we need by Kirk Cousins as much time as he can have. Zach Davidson, a player who needs to get better in the blocking game, but already looks like a wide receiver in a tight end's body. I mean, Zach Davidson quietly had an outstanding preseason, and I believe he is deserving of this roster spot. 5th round draft pick out of Central Missouri, I believe it was, has deserved his roster spot with the team, and I have the Vikings waiving Nick Muse. Whether Nick Muse is on the practice squad or is never with the Vikings again, I do not care, because Nick Muse unfortunately did not have a great preseason. I don't mean to be a hater, but Nick Muse, yeah, you win some, you lose some. And hopefully he can start in the practice squad and we get him better at blocking. We'll have to wait and see. Tackles for the Minnesota Vikings. I only have 3 offensive tackles making the roster for the Vikings. I'm going to get into this for a second. So Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill obviously being our starter. Darrisaw being compared to Trent Williams this early in his career. I'm so stoked. Okay, offensive line, my opinion, the biggest red flag on our entire Vikings team. We should be the best offense in the league. Now, I might be a little biased saying this, but I think that we should be the best offense in the league. But the problem is, if Kirk Cousins doesn't get enough time inside the pocket, we will not be the best offense in the league. So Christian Darrisaw, him going into year 2, hopefully we see him live up to the hype that people have been giving him. Brian O'Neill, obviously a stud. And then the other offensive tackle, I have Blake Brandel being our backup left tackle. And then you might ask yourself, well, where's our backup right tackle? I mean, Brian O'Neill suffered with some injuries. Who's going to back him up? Jesse Davis will move back to right tackle because in the preseason didn't like what I saw from him at right guard. We'll get into this a little bit more in a second because he is listed as a guard for the team, so he's not on this list. I have the Vikings releasing Vidarian Lowe, 6th-round draft pick, who should start his career on the practice squad with the team. Paris and Udo off the team. Goodbye. Yeah, Paris and Udo, hopefully I wish them the best of luck in the rest of their career. But moving on from those guys, Blake Brandel, super excited for him. He is going into year 3 with the team now, 6th-round draft pick from Oregon State. Moving on to interior offensive linemen, I have 6 interior offensive linemen making the roster. That is Ezra Cleveland going into year 3. Hopefully we get to see a year 3 jump. Garrett Bradbury winning the center role. Okay. We'll let that be. We've talked about Garrett Bradbury. We're going to move on from that one. Ed Ingram winning the starting roster spot at right guard. Maybe the only rookie who's going to be starting with us on the Vikings team right now. And I have him winning the roster spot over Jesse Davis. Just simply watch the preseason and you would have the exact same opinion. Jesse Davis did not live up to his first team snaps that he's been giving. Ed Ingram did. So Ed Ingram had one of the best jumps from maybe 6th on this list to starting caliber, day 1 starting caliber right guard. Great to see because that is a position that we need somebody to step up with, and I'm giving that to Ed Ingram right here. For our backups, Austin Schlottman will be our backup center, Wyatt Davis backup left guard, Jesse Davis will be our backup right guard and right tackle. So that is 9 offensive linemen right there. Leaving to the offensive lineman who will be released from the team, I have Chris Reed, who's going to be moved to IR. He has been playing through injuries the entire preseason, and no reason of putting him on the active roster right now. He's not a player you need to rush into play. Let him rest, wait till he's 100% healthy, and then he can be on the active roster. Kyle Hinton and Josh Sokol will start their career. Josh Sokol will start his career on the practice squad. Kyle Hinton will be going into year 3 on the practice squad. That's 3 seasons in a row on the practice squad. I'm pretty sure he'd be listed as a veteran now. So that'd be one of our veteran practice squad guys that he would take over. That really concludes all of our offensive guys right there. Outside of the interior offensive line, guys, is this not the best offense in the league? Top 5 offense in the league. Is this not? Looking at all these skilled position guys, we have arguably the best skilled position group in the league. If Irv Smith Jr., he is going to be healthy day 1. If he's healthy the entire season, we have the tight end spot locked down as well. It really just comes to this offensive line. Can they buy Kirk enough time for Kirk to be Kirk? That's the biggest question. Moving on to defense, and we're going to move on to the biggest, everybody's favorite position on defense, edge rushers. Okay, lights out to every opposing quarterback that's going to be playing the Minnesota Vikings. I know we went 0-3 in the preseason. Who the hell cares? Okay, these edge rushers looked beautiful, and the defensive linemen look beautiful in this preseason for the Minnesota Vikings. Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, 2 all-pro veteran outside linebackers, now edge rushers for the team, make one of the best pass rushing duos in the league. There's no question they're going to be great. How about the players who are in rotation? How about Patrick Jones, who's fit perfectly into this Ed Donatel 3-4 scheme for the Minnesota Vikings? A great sideline to sideline edge rusher for the team. He can play into coverage if you want him to. Patrick Jones is now looking like he was worth a 3rd-round draft pick. On top of that, DJ Wanham is DJ Wanham. He's been great his entire career since his rookie season until now. Janarius Robinson, I also have him making the roster. So that's 5 edge rushers right there for the Minnesota Vikings, all deserving of the roster spot. All have earned the roster spot. Now, Janarius Robinson is a different one. Janarius Robinson, we haven't seen enough of to be convinced that he is deserving of the roster spot. However, we've seen what he can do in college, and we're hoping that Janarius Robinson we saw at Florida State is gonna come out there on the field when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings season. If he doesn't make the roster, he will be on the practice squad perfectly fine. So I have the Vikings waiving both Luigi Villain and Zach Mccloud, two undrafted players from the Vikings this last 2022 offseason. Luigi Villain had a beautiful preseason, the best preseason we have ever seen, and he deserves a roster spot right off the bat. Thing is, he's an undrafted player. He's not going to get a roster spot right off the bat, but he could be one of the players that we do protect on our practice squad, because wow, was that preseason beautiful from Luigi Villain. Our entire edge rushing group, everybody looked great. Patrick Jones was one of the biggest winners this preseason. Love this edge rushing team for the Vikings, and it's great to know that, yes, we have one of the best pass rushing duos in the league. Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, arguably the best. Both of them have suffered with a lot of injuries, and it sucks to see, but it's great to know that we do have players like Jones, Wanham, Robinson, Luigi Villain, who can all step up into their spots. Maybe not look as good as them, definitely not as good as them, but can definitely hold their own. And then moving on to linebackers next, I have 4 linebackers making the roster. Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks obviously being our starters, with Brian Asamoah and Chaz Surratt being behind them. Looking at the players who I think will be released from the team, Troy Dye will start this next season on IR. We're going to talk about Troy Dye in a second here. I have Blake Lynch being on our practice squad once again. Blake Lynch, if you've been tuning into the show, is one of the most underrated players on the team, in my opinion. Blake Lynch has done a great job as a UDFA, stepping in for Eric Kendricks' injury. Stepping in as a starter, Blake Lynch has started games in the league. I wouldn't be surprised if he does make the roster. And then Koinku, who was our UDFA, I don't think is going to even make the practice squad. Okay, now, with that being said, these linebackers this preseason have been a massive disappointment other than Brian Asamoah. To see Brian Asamoah come out there as a 3rd-round draft pick and outperform everybody who's been on the team for 3-4 seasons was a disappointment. And I'm specifically looking at Troy Dye here. I don't mean to be a hater. I am a massive, obviously, I think I'm more of an optimist. I'm a realist. Okay, we'll say that. I am optimistic, and I was with Troy Dye. But to see a player like Troy Dye come in as a rookie and show some promise and not make any progression up to this point was not great. Now, with that being said, he might have been playing with injuries. So for that reason, I have the Vikings putting him on IR. We do know that he has suffered with some injuries in the preseason. So I hope year 3 or year 4, I believe this is year 3 it is for him, he will start the season on IR or the PUP list, and we will get to see Brian Asamoah and Chaz Surratt be on the active roster for the team. Hopefully, we can see some more progression from Troy Dye. Hopefully it was just injuries, but seeing him miss a lot of tackles, leading running backs like Mike Boone loose in the open field about 4 times on Saturday's game was a disappointment. So outside of Brian Asamoah, linebackers have not been great, but at the end of the day, we have Eric Kendricks. Okay, we have the best off-ball linebacker in the league, in my opinion. Now, that's bias. We have a top 5 off-ball linebacker in the league. And then looking at defensive front for the Minnesota Vikings, one of the biggest highlights this preseason was these defensive linemen. We're back to being a little bit more optimistic because the linebackers was a low light. Defensive line was a massive highlight. Starting with our starters right here, Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips, and Armon Watts. I am a huge Armon Watts fan. That is the most underrated player on this entire team. Now going on to contract year, I believe he was a 6th-round draft pick, if I have that right. He's a 5th or 6th-round draft pick for the team. Now going on to contract year, you have Harrison Phillips making his debut with the team at nose tackle. Dalvin Tomlinson, 2nd year with the team at the 3-tech. This is great for the Minnesota Vikings, who have a lot of veterans on the starting defensive front, all veteran players. A little bit curious on why the Vikings decided to put Harrison Phillips at the nose instead of Tomlinson. Tomlinson is like 20 pounds heavier, and he's starting at the 3-tech. Hey, do your thing, Ed Donatel. I trust your opinion way more than my own. We'll let that be. It's just usually you play the largest defensive lineman at the nose. For the backup nose tackle, I have TJ Smith making the roster. As of right now, this is a no-brainer. He's going on to year 2 with the team. T.Y. McGill did not make the roster, probably due to his injury that he just suffered on Saturday night's game. James Lynch being the rotational guy at the defensive end, both left and right defensive end. Love James Lynch. He's been a great rotational guy. Has not deserved the starting role quite yet, but we could see this happen going into year 4, which would be after this season. So he's going into year 3 right now. And then I have Jalen Twyman making the roster. I'm a huge Twyman fan. Got to put him on the list. Preseason was great from him. He's the exact same size as Aaron Donald. Got to love Jalen Twyman. So for the defensive line that I think that we will cut, Kenny Willekes, we have likely seen the rest of him in purple and gold. Unfortunately, I was a massive Kenny Willekes fan. probably fit more into a 4-3 scheme than he will into a 3-4 scheme. So I do have him being released from the team. Julian Taylor being on IR. Well, Kenny Willekes released from the team, but he's going to be on IR and then probably released after that is what I mean to say. T.Y. McGill, we did just release him. I believe that the Vikings will give him an IR contract. If they don't, it's perfectly fine. And then Asese, who we drafted in the 5th round, will start his career on the practice squad. Huge Asese fan. Obviously, I go to the University of Minnesota. I love the Gophers. He was a 5th round draft pick from Minnesota, and the defensive line is too good to have him make the roster quite yet, so he could be one of those protected players on our practice squad. And then Bullard being released from the team, Bullard being the veteran player on this list. And then moving on to defensive backs now, we're going to start with corners, with Patrick Peterson, Cameron Dantzler, and Shannon Sullivan being our starting corners. Shannon Sullivan obviously starting at the nickel. This is an entirely different cornerback room than we've seen in the past. Last year, the cornerback room was all veteran players. The year before that, it was all rookies. Going into this season, we have Patrick Peterson, the 32-year-old future Hall of Famer, starting at corner, being our cornerback 1. Now we don't have to go against Devontae Adams or Allen Robinson. Huge sigh of relief right there. Cameron Dantzler winning the starting role. I believe this would be his first year where he wins the starting role week 1. Great for Cameron Dantzler going into year 3 now. Has really made a huge jump from a late 3rd round draft pick. Shannon Sullivan, who we just brought in from the Packers, has worked with Ed Donatel in the past. Now looking at the rotational guys. Andrew Booth Jr. right now is questionable to play, but I do have him still being on the roster and not on IR simply because we need him. All right. Not only is Andrew Booth Jr. Questionable to play, but likely Patrick Peterson and Cam Dantzler have suffered with injuries recently as well. So Booth Jr. being one of those players who could be a future starter with the team. Caleb Evans had a beautiful preseason. Golly, I love this kid. Caleb Evans, 5th round draft pick from Mizzou, is looking like he'd lock a massive hit of a draft pick, and you love to see it. Ty Smith has signed a contract already with the team and will be our cornerback 6, in my opinion. Could play on both special teams and rotational guy. So I think the Vikings will release Perry Nickerson, Nate Hairston, and Chris Boyd, with Nickerson being on the practice squad. Chris Boyd, sorry Boyd fans. I love Boyd so much. I love what I've seen from him as a character. On the field, gotta move on from Chris Boyd. And then now moving on to safeties for the team. Gosh, these safeties. Are you kidding me? We have another stud safety room for the Vikings. Going into this offseason, safety was one of the biggest needs for the team, and both Lewisine and Cam Bynum and Josh Metellus lit up the preseason and training camp. So, like I mentioned, we're blessed with running backs, we're blessed with wide receivers, we're blessed with defensive linemen. How about safeties? As a matter of fact, the Vikings seem to be blessed with every position except for quarterback, kicker, and corner. Outside of that, the Vikings, again, are blessed with outstanding safeties. I have Lewisine winning the starting role over Cam Bynum this season. Right now, Bynum is listed as the starter alongside alongside Harrison Smith. However, Cine being a 1st round draft pick, I think they are going to end up putting him as a starter. Wow, Harrison Smith is 10 years older than Lewisine. Harrison Smith is now passing the torch down to these young guys, because not only Lewisine, Cam Bynum, and Josh Metellus are all on the rookie contracts right now. Harrison Smith, I believe he has a 4-year contract left, is a potential out in 2 years. We could be seeing the last couple seasons of Harrison Smith in the league and passing the torch down to these young guys who all look great. I love these corners so much. Cam Bynum looks amazing, looks like a steal of a draft pick in the 4th round. Lewisine is Lewisine. Josh Metellus looked great. Also, Miles Dorn, hard-hitting safety the entire season, isn't even going to make the roster in my opinion, but he should be on the practice squad as well. And that's our 4 safeties right there. Harrison Smith, Lewisine, Cam Bynum, Josh Metellus. Whether the Vikings start Lewisine or Cam Bynum, I don't care, because they both look amazing. I love both of these guys. Josh Metellus also looks amazing. So I think the Vikings will waive both Miles Dorn and Mike Brown, with Miles Dorn making the practice squad once again. Miles Dorn or Josh Metellus, one of these players will win the safety 4 spot, and the other one will likely be on the practice squad. So we're blessed with safeties like we always are. So that wraps up our defense. Defense looks great. Offense looks even better. I mean, what is holding the Vikings back? What is holding the backs? There is no excuses for the Vikings this next season. Yeah, you can argue last year, injuries, and Mike Zimmer. Okay, fine. We'll accept your argument. This year, are there any excuses? I mean, on paper, we just looked at one of the best rosters in the entire league. Looking at special teams to cover everything at the end, Greg Joseph, Ryan Wright, and Andrew DePaulo has already won their roster spots. Ryan Wright Vikings could sign a veteran punter if they wanted to. Love what I've seen from Ryan Wright. He should be our starting punter, as well as our kick returner is going to be Kene Iwangu. Punt returner will be Amir Smith-Marset. Super excited for this upcoming season. Really stoked for Ryan Wright. I've never been this excited for a punter in my entire life, and I'm so pumped for this UDFA out of Tulane, who is expected to be our starter in 2022 and 2023, and for the rest of his entire career. This is a future Hall of Fame punter right here. We just covered one of the best roster spots, or one of the best rosters in the entire league. And I'm so stoked for this upcoming season. NFL football is back. We are here all season to cover the Minnesota Vikings, week in and week out. Breaking news, past news that for some reason we didn't cover when it was breaking news. We are here through the pain, through the enjoyment, through the love and hate that is being a Minnesota Vikings fan. Stay tuned.